Amanda Knox and the murder of Meredith Kercher. Perugia, a medieval city in the heart of Italy's Umbria region, perches on a hilltop like a walled citadel. Its steep cobblestone streets twist past ochre-colored buildings and open onto airy piazzas where students gather beneath Renaissance arches. For centuries, the city has attracted travelers for its language schools and a promise of a quiet, picturesque Italian life. In the autumn of 2007, Perugia welcomed tens of thousands of students from across the world. Among them was a bright-eyed American, Amanda Knox, 20 years old, who had come to improve her Italian and to explore Europe. Among her flatmates in a small hillside cottage was Meredith Kercher, 21, an exchange student from the University of Leeds in England. Neither young woman could have guessed that, within weeks of meeting, one would be dead and the other would be accused of murder. The case would become one of the most famous and contentious criminal investigations of the new millennium. Meredith Kercher had grown up in South London in a close-knit family. Friends described her as warm, quick to smile, diligent in her studies, and excited about her year abroad in Italy. Her parents later said she had chosen Perugia for its reputation as a safe, friendly university town. By September 2007, Meredith had settled into the apartment at Via della Pergola 7, a modest two-story cottage on a steep lane near the university. She shared the house with Amanda Knox and two Italian women who were a little older and worked in town. The arrangement was typical of student life in Perugia: inexpensive rooms, a mix of languages and cultures, and a short walk to the university. Meredith quickly made friends and immersed herself in Italian language and culture. She was described as responsible, disciplined, but with a dry wit that could light up a room. Amanda Knox had arrived from Seattle in late September 2007. Friends called her Mandy. She was athletic and outdoorsy, a soccer player back home, and eager to experience Europe. Her outgoing, sometimes impulsive manner contrasted with Meredith's more reserved style, yet the two got along well in those first weeks. To help pay living expenses, Amanda took a part-time job at a local bar owned by Patrick Lumumba. Around that same time, she met Raffaele Sollecito, a shy 23-year-old computer science student from southern Italy. They began dating quickly, and Knox often spent nights at his small apartment not far from Via della Pergola. On October 31, 2007, the streets of Perugia were crowded with students celebrating Halloween. Knox wore a playful costume. Meredith went out with friends as well. According to later testimony, both women enjoyed the festivities and returned to their respective apartments or friends' homes in the early hours. The next day, November 1st, was All Saints' Day, a public holiday in Italy. Most shops were closed, classes were canceled, and the cottage at Via della Pergola grew quiet. By that evening, Meredith stayed in, reportedly watching a movie with a British friend before returning home. Knox spent the night at Raphael's apartment. Sometime that night, between 9 p.m. and the early hours of November 2nd, an intruder entered Meredith Kercher's bedroom. The attack was violent and swift. Neighbors later reported a scream. A witness heard footsteps running away. By dawn, Meredith lay dead in her room, her throat cut, with evidence of a struggle. The morning of November 2, 2007, began uneventfully for Knox and Sollecito. When Knox returned to the cottage late that morning, she noticed the front door ajar, a few drops of blood in the bathroom sink, and an unflushed toilet in another bathroom. Assuming one of her flatmates had left in a hurry, she showered and went back to Raphael's place. Later, when neither Meredith nor the Italian flatmates could be reached by phone, Knox and Sollecito returned to the cottage. They found Meredith's bedroom door locked. Concerned, they phoned one of the Italian roommates and then the local police. 2 officers arrived around noon. When they forced the bedroom door, they found a horrific scene. Meredith lying on the floor, partly covered by a duvet, in a pool of blood. The cottage was cordoned off. From that moment, the house on Via della Pergola became a crime scene that would be examined, re-examined, and debated for years to come. News of the murder of a young British student in a picturesque university town sent shockwaves across Italy and Britain. Journalists descended on Perugia. Early speculation ranged from burglary gone wrong to a crime of sexual violence. The autopsy determined that Meredith had died of a deep knife wound to the neck combined with blood loss from multiple stab injuries. There were signs of a struggle. Some forensic reports suggested possible sexual intrusion, though whether it amounted to a completed assault became a matter of legal debate. Within days, Perugia's police and the Polizia Scientifica scientific police began collecting samples of blood, hair, fibers, and footprints. They focused on the cottage's flatmates and their friends. Knox and Sollecito were questioned repeatedly. Their accounts of the previous night contained minor inconsistencies that police found suspicious. Under intense pressure to solve the crime quickly, authorities arrested Amanda Knox, Raffaele Sollecito, and Patrick Lumumba on November 6, 2007. The inclusion of Lumumba was based on Knox's own statement during an overnight interrogation in which she implicated her employer. She later retracted the accusation, saying she had been confused and exhausted during long questioning without a lawyer or competent translator. Lumumba had a solid alibi. His bar had been open that evening, and a Swiss businessman testified he had been there. Lumumba was released after 2 weeks but later sued Knox for defamation. The arrests drew massive media attention. Italian and international press outlets portrayed Knox as the centerpiece of a lurid narrative, an alleged foxy Knoxy, supposedly involved in a twisted sexual plot. These headlines would follow her for years, often eclipsing the fact that investigators had not yet produced conclusive physical evidence linking her to the killing. Forensic teams had, however, recovered fingerprints and DNA that did not belong to Knox, Sollecito, or any of the Housey residents. When a match was found in the database, attention shifted to Rudy Hermangade, a 20-year-old man from the Ivory Coast who had been living in Perugia and had prior incidents of burglary. Gade had fled to Germany shortly after the murder, but was apprehended there later in November. His DNA was found on Meredith's body, on her clothing, and on her handbag. He admitted to being at the scene that night but claimed he had been in the bathroom when an unknown intruder killed Meredith. In a separate fast-track trial in 2008, Gade was convicted of sexual assault and murder and initially sentenced to 30 years, later reduced to 16 on appeal. He ultimately served about 13 years before release in 2021. Gade's conviction seemed to establish at least one perpetrator, yet prosecutors in Perugia argued that he had not acted alone. They maintained that Knox and Sollecito had participated in a joint attack, an assertion that would shape the trials to come. Public prosecutor Giuliano Mignini presented a narrative that the murder stemmed from a drug-fueled sexual encounter that escalated to violence. According to this theory, Knox had instigated the assault, Sollecito restrained Meredith, and Gade delivered the fatal stab wound. Central to the prosecution's case was a kitchen knife seized from Sollecito's apartment that forensic experts claimed bore Knox's DNA on the handle and Meredith's on the blade. They also cited a metal bra clasp from the crime scene that, according to the original analysis, contained a trace of Sollecito's DNA. Both items would later come under heavy scrutiny. Independent experts during appeals criticized the handling of the evidence. The knife had been collected weeks after the crime, and the tiny DNA trace attributed to Meredith was judged unreliable. The bra clasp had lain on the cottage floor for 6 weeks before collection and was handled in a way that risked contamination. The trial opened in January 2009 in a climate saturated by sensational press coverage. British tabloids emphasized Meredith's tragic story and painted Knox as duplicitous. American outlets often portrayed Knox as a victim of a flawed foreign justice system. Italian media wavered between the two portrayals. Throughout the proceedings, the courtroom was packed with reporters. The private grief of the Kercher family, who sought justice for their daughter, was often overshadowed by the circus-like atmosphere. On December 4, 2009, the Perugia court found Amanda Knox guilty of murder and sexual assault, sentencing her to 26 years in prison. Raffaele Sollecito received 25 years. Gade's conviction for participating in the killing had already been upheld. Knox's family and many legal observers expressed shock, pointing to weaknesses in the forensic evidence and the lack of a clear motive. In the United States, commentators increasingly described her as a possible victim of a wrongful conviction. Amanda Knox was transferred to the Capan Women's Prison outside Perugia. Raffaele Sollecito went to a men's prison in Terni. Both continued to insist they were innocent. In her letters home, Knox described confusion, fear, and the strain of facing decades behind bars in a country whose language she was still learning. Knox's defense attorneys, Luciano Gerga and Carlo Dalla Vedova, filed appeals, pointing to problems with the evidence and suggesting that the Perugia investigation had been shaped too much by early assumptions rather than solid proof. Sollecito's lawyers did the same. The appeals process in Italy is not a mere review of paperwork. It allows a new court to rehear testimony and order fresh examinations. This would prove crucial. The first major appeal began in November 2010 before the Court of Assizes of Appeal in Perugia, presided over by Judge Claudio Pertillo-Hellman. A turning point came in 2011 when the court ordered two independent forensic experts from La Sapienza University in Rome, Carla Vecchiotti and Stefano Conti, to re-examine the DNA evidence. Their report found that the supposed trace of Meredith's DNA on the kitchen knife was too low in quantity and quality to be considered reliable, and that the bra clasp sample was likely contaminated. They also criticized the original collection and storage of the evidence. This undermined the core of the prosecution's case. The appeal also revisited the lack of a credible motive and highlighted that most physical evidence tied only Gade, not Knox or Sollecito, to the bedroom where Meredith was killed. On October 3, 2011, after nearly 4 years behind bars, the appellate court overturned the convictions of Amanda Knox and Raffaele Sollecito. Both were released immediately. Outside the courtroom, Knox's sobs of relief were heard around the world as television cameras captured the moment. For the Kercher family, the reversal was devastating. They had endured years of wrenching travel to Italy for hearings and now faced the possibility that no one except Gade would be held responsible for Meredith's death. Meredith's parents and siblings continued to believe that justice had not been fully served, and their pain was often amplified by the sensational coverage of the case. The story did not end with the 2011 acquittal. Under Italian law, the prosecution could appeal an acquittal to the nation's highest court, the Court of Cassation. In March 2013, that court annulled the Hellman acquittal, citing shortcomings in reasoning, and ordered a new appeal trial, this time in Florence. The Florence retrial began in September 2013. The prosecution revived its theory of a group attack and urged the court to reinstate the convictions. On January 30, 2014, the Florence Appeals Court found Knox and Sollecito guilty once again. Knox, who had returned to the United States after her 2011 release, was sentenced in absentia to 28 years and 6 months. Sollecito received 25 years. Sollecito, though in Italy, was not immediately detained. He remained free pending a final decision by the Court of Cassation. Knox stated from Seattle that she would never voluntarily return to Italy, maintaining her innocence. The case once again became front-page news worldwide, illustrating the dramatic swings of the Italian multi-tiered justice system. The saga reached its conclusion on March 27, 2015, when the Court of Cassation definitively overturned the Florence convictions, fully exonerating both Knox and Sollecito. The High Court's written reasoning, released later, was scathing toward the earlier investigations, citing glaring errors and lack of biological traces linking Knox or Sollecito to the murder. The court ruled that the two young students did not commit the crime. This decision closed the criminal proceedings against them. Gade's conviction remained final, and he served his sentence. Knox's legal battles were not entirely over. She pursued a case at the European Court of Human Rights (ECHR), arguing that during her early interrogation in 2007 she had been questioned without a lawyer or competent interpreter and under undue pressure. In January 2019, the ECHR ruled in Knox's favor, finding that Italy had violated her rights under Article 6 of the European Convention on Human Rights' right to a fair trial. The court awarded her €18,400 in damages and legal costs. Amanda Knox returned to the United States after her 2011 release. In the years since the final acquittal, she has written a memoir waiting to be heard, 2013, worked as a journalist and advocate for criminal justice reform, and married writer Christopher Robinson. She has spoken publicly about the trauma of her imprisonment and the way she was portrayed in the media. Raffaele Sollecito pursued a career in information technology and occasionally speaks about wrongful conviction issues. He has often expressed sorrow for Meredith Kercher's family. The Kercher family has remained dignified yet resolute in remembering Meredith as a bright young woman whose promising life was cut short. They have emphasized that while legal processes shifted over the years, their loss was permanent. The case has become a landmark example of how sensational reporting can distort public perception of a criminal investigation. Early tabloid portrayals of Amanda Knox as a femme fatale later drew criticism for sexism and for focusing on her character rather than evidence. True crime documentaries, dramatizations, and countless books have continued to revisit the case, often re-examining the evidence and the competing theories. Scholars of media and law cite the Knox case as an example of the clash between a globalized press, local law enforcement culture, and the presumption of innocence. Despite the final judicial outcome, some questions remain debated among the public. Was Gade acting entirely alone? Could investigators have built a stronger case had evidence been collected and preserved more carefully? Legal experts often point to the case as illustrating the importance of proper forensic protocols and of guarding against confirmation bias, the risk of shaping evidence to fit an early narrative. Amid all the trials and headlines, it is Meredith Kercher who is too often overshadowed. Her friends and family describe her as intelligent, caring, and ambitious, with dreams of a career in international relations. They have asked that her memory be honored not with speculation, but with recognition of the vibrant young woman she was. The cottage at Via della Pergola 7 has since been vacated and later renovated. Yet for many in Perugia, it remains a somber reminder of a tragedy that forever changed the lives of two families and drew the eyes of the world to their small hilltop city. If you found this deep dive into the Amanda Knox case insightful, we invite you to stay with us for more carefully researched stories that seek truth and honor the real people affected. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss our future explorations into some of the most compelling and complex true crime cases from around the world. Your support helps us continue bringing you well-sourced, thoughtful investigations, always with respect for the victims and their families.